Amendment to H.R. 2633, offered by Mr. Meeks, New York. Page 2, beginning on line 3. Insert the following new paragraphs and redesignate accordingly.
Without objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The representative is recognized for 5 minutes on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm introducing this amendment because I believe that it's extremely important that we acknowledge the fuller history here if we're going to look comprehensively at the United States-South African relations. And if this bill is going to criticize the South African government's decisions, some of which, as I said, I disagree with, just as there's a lot of disagreements that I have with the United States government and that we've had not only now, but over the years. But so therefore the record should also reflect the terrible decisions that were made in South Africa by South Africa's apartheid regime prior to 1994. Should be clear. So this amendment just restates the basic facts that an apartheid Afrikaner government ruled South Africa between 1940 to the 1990s. That government refused to grant political or civil rights to the nation's black majority. It is also true that this government, the apartheid government of South Africa, imprisoned Nelson Mandela for over 27 years. This apartheid government, who looked at black South Africans having no rights, no ability to vote, no ability to free movement. Yet the United States government did not sanction it. In fact, it was the last country to join to sanction South Africa after the rest of the world had done it. The last one. Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa in 1994. Yet it took from 1994 to 2008 to even get Nelson Mandela off the terrorist list in the United States. We've got a lot of work to do to make up to South Africa for our awful behavior. So to come in this short period of time, as Mr. Jackson said, in less than 30 years, and now want to sanction the South African government after all that it has been through is just wrong. And this record should reflect the true history of what has taken place, because this amendment takes us back to where we should never want to go. We should be able to sit down and talk to South Africa, who over those last 30 years, with the leadership of Nelson Mandela, have worked with us cooperatively also in many areas. This disagreement that we have on certain issues shouldn't cause a fracture that will lead us continually to move in the wrong direction. So if we're going to do this kind of amendment, let it reflect the true history of what has taken place. Let it reflect South Africa's place of leadership on the continent of Africa for the last 30 years. Let it reflect the spirit of those black South African citizens of coming back and being able to become presidents and governments headed by black South Africans when they've been forbidden to do it for such a long period of time. So I urge my colleagues to support this amendment so that the record would be clear and reflect who and what South Africa represents in its entirety and not in just a limited viewpoint. Now yield back the balance of my time.
Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the middle of the night and in bad faith, Democrats introduced this amendment, which has no relevance to the underlying bill. The findings listed in my legislation call out the bad actions by the current South African government. And I don't see any role in going back and looking at past governments and the relationships previously. This is the current South African government and the U.S.-South African relations now. And the ranking member's amendment is nothing more, in my opinion, than an attempt to justify the ANC's egregious actions toward Afrikaner community. Arguing over findings language is frankly a waste of everyone's time, especially considering that findings do not have any bearing on actual law, and regardless, if this amendment were to be adopted, the ranking member would still continue to oppose the underlying bill. I encourage every member of this committee to focus on the relevant bill language and oppose this amendment. And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Any other members seek recognition? Representative Jackson.
I would like to lend my support and agreement with our ranking member Meeks, and please tell me it's appropriate for me to introduce an amendment. I may introduce. Okay, thank you so much.
Yield back.
Yield back.
Any other members seek recognition? Seeing none. Representative yields back. I oppose this amendment. There being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the amendment offered by Representative Meeks, number 41. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to.
Roll call.
Roll call vote having been requested. We will postpone that roll call vote. Pursuant to Chair's previous announcement, this vote will be postponed. Any further amendments? Representative Meeks is recognized.
I have an amendment at the desk. 42.
Clerk shall distribute the amendment.
James, to come up here one second. James.
Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2633, offered by Mr. Meeks of New York. Page 14, line 12, strike, and legal authorities.
Without objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The representative is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. My second amendment is a somewhat technical but nonetheless important fix. When we negotiate sanction bills, and I've negotiated many of them over the years, one of the foundational questions is whether the sanctions authority will be mandatory, the president shall do something, or permissive, he may do something. I've supported both types of sanction bills depending on the specific context in question. The world is not a simple place, and we need to adjust our policy levers to specific contexts. But let's be clear. The executive branch doesn't need to cite a legal authority as to why it is not sanctioning an individual when the underlying authority is permissive in the first place. Yet as drafted, this bill is committing a basic logical error. Moreover, Global Magnitsky has a unique mechanism that allows the chairman and the ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee to send a letter that the administration must respond to and reach a sanctions determination by law. The language in this bill muddies that established process. My amendment fixes these errors by striking a few words. So I urge all of my colleagues to support it, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Representative yields back. I support this amendment. Do any other representatives seek recognition? Seeing none. Being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the amendment offered by Representative Meeks, number 42. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Any further amendments? Representative Jacobs.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk, Jacobs number 3.
Clerk shall distribute the amendment. Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 2633, offered by Ms. Jacobs of California. Redesignate Section 7 as Section 8. After Section 6, insert the following. Section 7, report
Without
on-
objection, further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. The representative is recognized for 5 minutes on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment is very simple. The Trump administration has stopped all refugee resettlement programs in the United States with one exception: Afrikaners from South Africa. As part of our committee's oversight responsibilities, it's important we understand the full accounting of U.S. taxpayer dollars required to resettle Afrikaners in the United States. This amendment would ask for a one-time report with this information. It's a common sense amendment and something I urge all of my colleagues to support. I yield back.
Representative yields back. Now recognize myself. I oppose this amendment. President Trump is justified in providing asylum to these individuals. More importantly, this report does not have relevance in this particular bill. This bill is about holding the South African government accountable about their actions that they have taken that directly and negatively impact the interests of the United States of America. Any other representatives seek recognition? Representative Meeks.
Yes, I thank Ranking Member Jacobs for offering this amendment, which requires the Department of State to report to this committee the amount of money our government is paying to resettle Afrikaners, refugees in the United States. This comes at the same time President Trump has blocked all other refugee settlements to the United States. That is a pretty remarkable when you think about it. Let that sink in. The United States is welcoming white Afrikaners from South Africa, many of whom will tell you they neither need or want refugee status, while we actively turn away people from war-torn countries and those escaping extreme human rights abuses and political violence. The American people deserve to know how much money of their taxpayer dollars are funding this political stunt of a refugee program. So I urge my colleagues to support Representative Jacobs' amendment that will give us much needed transparency. And I yield back to balance my time.
Any other members seek recognition? Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to point out that this amendment was offered by my treasured colleague from California less than 15 minutes before the start of markup, and appears to be a last-ditch effort to criticize President Trump for his leadership in offering refuge and resettlement for legitimately persecuted Afrikaners. I fully support knowing where every dollar of taxpayer funding goes, but this report does not belong in a bill that reviews the bilateral relationship between the U.S. and South Africa. This amendment is also particularly ironic, given that Democrats had absolutely no issue with taxpayer dollars being used to transport millions of illegal aliens into the United States during the Biden-Harris administration. Even today, Democrats have taken no responsibility for the immigration crisis directly caused by these failed policies. I encourage every member of this committee to oppose this amendment. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion? Representative Jaipal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank my colleague, Representative Jacobs, for introducing this amendment. I just want to remind the committee and anyone that's watching that the refugee resettlement program has long been a bipartisan program. As the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, I can tell you that it was Democrats and Republicans together who worked on establishing the program, supporting the program, and in fact, the evangelical community has called this the crown jewel of American humanitarianism. This is a program that has saved lives, that have supported people who have been fleeing persecution and conflict, and shown the United States' sense of compassion, built our leadership around the world as we build all of our relationships. And so I think it is entirely appropriate that we find out how much money is being spent on this, given that the rest of the refugee resettlement program has been brought to an abrupt and cruel stop. And there are people that are stranded around the world because the United States has reneged on our promises. So I urge adoption of the Jacobs Amendment, and I yield back.
Representative yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Representative Jackson.
Thank you so much, Chairman. I look forward to supporting the amendment of my colleague, Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs. We are here to deliberate the fate of a nation that is half a world away, a nation that is has been long entangled in the bitter veins and vines of racial animosity that was in large part created by the United States of America. South Africa is a baby amongst nations on the continent. We have had a wholesale retreat from anything humanitarian, anything decent, anything engaging in diplomacy across the state. Striking this blow to the South African government is a strike to a blow to the entire continent. I've lived long enough to witness the lies that power tells itself. I have seen the myths that shroud oppression. I must speak plainly against the cruelty of injustice masquerading as legitimate concern. I support the amendment of the Honorable Sarah Jacobs. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seek recognition? Being no further discussion, the question now occurs on the amendment offered by Representative Jacobs, number 3. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed to. A roll call vote has been requested pursuant to the chair's previous announcement. This vote will be postponed.
During a committee hearing on H.R. 2633, Representative Gregory Meeks, Democrat, New York, introduced an amendment meant to place the United States' relationship with South Africa in fuller historical context. He argued that if lawmakers were going to criticize the current South African government, the record should also reflect the decades of injustice under apartheid and the failures of the United States to respond appropriately at the time. Meeks reminded his colleagues that the apartheid regime denied political and civil rights to the black majority, imprisoned Nelson Mandela for 27 years, and restricted basic freedoms, yet the U.S. government was one of the last to impose sanctions. Even after Mandela became president in 1994, it took until 2008 for his name to be removed from the U.S. terrorist list. Meeks urged his colleagues to support the amendment so that the official record would recognize South Africa's transition, its leadership on the continent, and the resilience of black South Africans who were once forbidden from governing their own country. He stressed that disagreements today should not erase decades of cooperation that began under Mandela's leadership. Representative Ronny Jackson, Republican, Texas, opposed the amendment, calling it irrelevant to the underlying bill. He argued that the legislation was meant to address the current South African government's actions, not past regimes, and accused Democrats of trying to justify the behavior of the African National Congress. Jackson urged his colleagues to reject the proposal, saying it was a distraction from the purpose of the bill. The amendment, known as Amendment Number 41, failed to advance after a voice vote, though a roll call vote was later requested and postponed.